Happy New Year, YouTube. This is Shrine King, and today, for Kings Court, I'm going to be doing a early access appraisal. I'm intending to eventually do full-on appraisals, where the idea is I've played through the game, at least like if it's the full game, and that way I can give an overall appraisal of the entirety of it. Just to get a couple things cleared, like I said, this is still early access, but this game is something I've been playing quite a bit of, and I know there's a lot of people interested into this game. So I do want to actually touch point on some of the appraisals just to kind of give an overall rating of where they're at, where I feel that they're going to go, and then just state kind of like the overall potential of this game. And while I'm doing the appraisal, I'm going ahead and I have some videos coming in through in the background here so that you can actually see some of the gameplay. You can see the intensity and kind of examples of some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about. So moving forward, for any appraisal, I have 6 categories really that I'm looking at and the rating. So 1 is the gameplay itself. 2 is difficulty, because that's important for the viewers, to decide if it's something that they want to get into based on how difficult it can be. Design and features, right? So like this is material in the game that maybe, like for example, provides extra replayability. Maybe stuff that you can earn money, things like that. Stability is definitely a big one, especially when trying to maybe review some early access or games that are first coming out as their final product. Story and replay value is my last category. Like I said, design and features kind of links together to some of that replay value, so that's some of the things that you'll probably see. But there are many reasons to why people might replay a game. So without further ado, like I said, this is Escape from Tarkov. It is currently in closed beta, very shortly to go into open beta, which means it should be reaching release sometime soon. Which is one of the reasons why I decided to go ahead and get this out as like a precursor for those who are probably interested in getting it when it does go into open, along with as it comes out. And then also I'll follow up with another review once things are kind of like all there, and depending on what they bring out. So first I want to get right into the gameplay, because here you can see a lot of videos kind of showing the gameplay. So you'll see visually, man, this is amazing. It is very pretty. The sounds are really intense. A lot of the game mechanics actually work really well. So you'll see I'm just running with a hatchet. I'm coming into this match. I'm trying to see if I can't get some loot. I am engaging someone. You'll see I smartly kind of hid, worked around. You see this guy is laying down. It's a little hard to move around when you're laying down, and all I had to do was hit him in the head. And then drag and drop for looting, but hey, you can't just grab all loot, so here's a gameplay mechanic that it just builds on that emphasis of the stress in the combat, because you're like, man, it's very time sensitive. I'm in the open, anybody can kill me right now, but I still have to examine this thing before I can even take it off. So that the gameplay, like as you can see, I'm pulling it up, I have to search other things. If I'm going to try to reload, I actually have to reload, and then I have to pull ammo. So the gameplay mechanics in this game are really what makes a huge delivery to me. I would actually give them a plus or a 5.0 rating. And that's depending on how you want to look at it. So either way. So I'm typically going to do a 5, like 0 to 5 rating scale. But a 5 is basically an A, right? A 4 is a B, 3 is a C, 2 is a D, and then a 1 is an F. So the gameplay ability, right, is generally really good. The only things that are kind of lacking in the gameplay right now is server stability. That's causing a lot of concerns, because there's desyncs that continuously happen as more and more people get into this. But they had a lot more people get into this than that was originally anticipated. So they're doing pretty well as trying to like work it out and fix it, and it's still playable. Sometimes it gets very frustrating. For those, if you do get into the game, I highly recommend that if it is getting frustrating, just take a break, play something else for a little bit, and then just come back to it. And also, depending on where you're at, it does seem like there's certain time frames where it's a little more stable than other time frames. Difficulty. This is a intense and very difficult game. If you are not into hardcore, this game will not be for you. This one, it doesn't. This category doesn't really come with a rating or ranking necessarily to say whether it's good or bad. It's more to just say how difficult is it, and or like how hardcore it is, and that's for you as the viewer to decide. Is that something I'm typically into? Do I really want to play something that's very intense and hard to manage? So I've seen some games that are a little harder to me as playability sense to like really kind of do things. But I mean, this game, I'm not kidding you, it is very easy to get headshot. So it's one shot kill there. Even if it wasn't a headshot, there's quite a few occurrences where someone might just double tap you with a like fully auto weapon. And believe me, they were firing a lot more bullets than that, but it wouldn't matter. You just die. So I would say in a difficulty sense, especially with all of the key bindings and different things that you can do, I would rank this in the upper scale of probably up to a 4, approaching a 5. And the reason why I keep it away from 5 is because even with the intensity involved, it still does not seem to a point of where it's just absolute frustration and where it's literally impossible. If it's consistent frustration, then I would say, okay, that's probably a 5 rating. So this one is up to that point where you're like, yes, you will have some very frustrating moments, and that's where I mentioned, like, I would recommend a break once that starts to occur. Design and features. So the design and features is really immaculate with what they have. So each raid, so the idea is you go into a stage, and that is a raid. And of those raids, there's a certain amount of time for that raid, and you take a certain amount of loot in, whatever you decide to, and that loot is at risk. And that you have insurance that you can pay to traders, and traders will pay you for certain items, or you can buy certain items from them, leading into this design mechanic of this game that is extremely interesting. And it's very addictive in a way. So when you've earned something and you have continued to do well with it, you kind of bond with it. I actually have a SKS and a shotgun that I've named simply because I keep going through and winning with those weapons. Now, given it's the same scenario that at some point in time I might end up losing it, and it's a very sad day if I lose Betsy, I'm telling you. But these design mechanics where it's like, okay, you're running through, there's a lot of noise when you're running, there's less noise when you're not running, you can actually basically purposely walk very slowly and silently. You have different guns with silencers, you have crates which will have items in it, there's AI that has items, and like one of the mechanics or designs to this game is that it is PvP, but it is also PvE. And it's not necessarily one or the other. It's literally both put together. So what I mean by that being both put together is that you come in as a player, obviously, and there are other players that are spawning in potentially at the same... Well, there will be players that are spawning in at the same time you are. There are up to a certain amount of slots based on whichever map you're going into. So you'll see here I'm actually selecting different maps and different times. And then here's the map layout, and I can pick where I'm going to spawn, and it tells me where I'm going to have to go to extract. And then you'll see that there's a bunch of players in the list, and then I'm going to be loading in. So not only do you have that, but people can also pick to be a scav once every 30 minutes. When they do so, they actually come into matches with other players. And now they are actually a player scav, basically with the potential of assisting the AI trying to kill the players, which brings a whole different level of difficulty and challenge to the game, which is part of why it's on the harder side, because there are so many challenges and there are so many ways for you to get killed that it does bring up a lot of challenges. And that those designs, it's amazing. And the fact that like they went through and they went through and looked at all the different noise profiles of every weapon, and they've been very serious about the sound in this game. It is one of the first games that I am so intense about listening rather than what I'm necessarily seeing. I use my ears to help me figure out where I need to look. And that just, the fact that they can deliver that design is really, really incredible. One thing I do want to cut to when I talk about features, right? So for this game in particular, they do have certain packages when you go to buy. There's a lot of controversy about those packages to say whether or not it's pay to win. Since, like I mentioned, of all the different ways that you can die in this, and the fact that even with like the heaviest armor in the game, it still can just be a couple shots and you're dead. I don't think there's any real design of a pay to win model. But one of the key things that they did have was that they did have multiple packages, which was more about when did you want to access this game, which honestly was kind of smart on their point because, again, they had the servers. They didn't really have a very big team. They did not have a lot of infrastructure for this. So when it got to a point that so many people got involved, they couldn't even handle it. So you'll see here, this is actually a point where I see a player, I wiggled to try to tell them, hey, I'm not trying to fight you, and they were already taking shots at me. So I see one was on the left, I'm coming here on the right, I see that there's more on the right, so I'm coming back for the one on the left, hoping that maybe I can get him, and nope, he's over here, so then here I charge him, I'm trying to kill him, but it didn't work out. And that's the same design. So like there, I came in just as a scav, but you'll see like those players, they came in together and they came in equipped. They had guns, they had the bags. They're there and they mean business. And that's just the way it is. And because this game is so difficult and it's very challenging, and you run the risk of losing things, people are not necessarily very trusting. So if you're looking for a friendly environment, by going into the match and people are just gonna be like, oh, hey guy, it's cool, man, go ahead, no problem. You're not probably gonna see that. It's just because of trust. People don't trust people because you always had the guys who made the bad impression and they just went around and hatcheted everyone, even though they were saying, yeah, I'm friendly, which did happen, by the way, quite a bit. So those things do happen. So overall, design and features, I would actually give them a 4.5. The reason why I'm not going to the 5 is currently one of the things that they've mentioned a lot is that there's going to be a story. There's going to be a lot of objectives, and there's going to be a lot of things to do, and that they do kind of want to get into this open world model. Well, that model's not delivered yet, so we don't really see that yet. We have I think it's 4 maps that we can pick from. And they're all good maps, and they're very interesting and fun to play. But when it comes to like story, there is no story right now. So they haven't delivered that aspect yet. So when it comes to the design and the objectivity of the matches, there is a slight lack, or I guess a reason of desire. So they mentioned that they have all these plans, and if they do put those in, I'm telling you, it's going to be amazing. But currently, right now, it's a very good PvP-oriented game with the grind aspect of getting loot and better loot that you can customize. Speaking of the design, one of the things that they do have is that all of their weapons are fully customizable as you'd expect in real life. And we are talking about hundreds upon hundreds of modifications that you can do to multitudes of weapons, which I don't know how many weapons are in the game right now, but I believe it's somewhere in upward 30s. Which they're probably just going to keep going. I think they kind of stuck to a more Russian point at this point, and they have an American. I know that they have Euros, so I'm expecting a European weapons to come in, like the FAL. But currently, it's just where it's at. So there's definitely a lot of stuff that they also have mentioned that they're bringing in. And one thing I will say is that they do keep bringing this stuff in. It's not something that they're like, hey, we're going to do this, and it just never happens. They say, hey, we're going to do this, and it's literally like a month or two later, it's there, right? And maybe they do, every couple of weeks they'll have little pieces of it, but the big package gets delivered in about a month or two. So they've done a lot of good work towards that. So, and that explains that 4.5 for that. Now, stability is one that I have to say is definitely lacking at this point. It does get into a point where stability comes out pretty good at certain points, but since they got into the beta portion, it has been pretty much consistently a nightmare. Every update, stability goes to crap. Every new release to the public, so for example, the next beta wave, it goes to crap. And it normally stays that way for quite a while. they're very responsive to it, so they do actually try to get more servers or try to work on the stability, and that's all good. That is really good that they keep doing that. It's just the fact that you keep hitting it. So, for example, if you're working in an IT field or something like that, and you've gone through, let's say, multiple releases at this point, which is technically what they do based on each wave. If they saw, hey, when we had 1,000 people, and then we added another 1,000, and we added another 1,000, it kept coming to a situation where we needed to split out to this many servers. Well, then they should have a number and an expectation based on the income, because they already kind of know based on the sales, right, that are coming through. So they should be able to say, hey, look, the next wave, we're talking about 10,000. We need this X amount of servers to keep this up without being having the stability issues. The updates and stuff like that, I think really it's more about the updates. I think they're actually potentially doing those updates while the servers are still going. So some parts are probably getting patched to those servers, and that slows them down. And that's where we probably see the server issues, because we do know, hey, within a day or two, typically it cleans up a bit. The other part is it's very hard for a company to manage dynamic timings. So I believe currently in the evening is a time when there's a lot of people probably playing, and that causes them more issues as well. So, because you could say, hey, I need this many servers at this given time, but then how do you handle, hey, I now need this many more servers at said time, only during that time for a couple, maybe 3-5 hours, and then we cycle back down. It doesn't really help them. So they'd have to make sure that they're always up at that higher count, which then comes into efficiencies and utilization. And those are questions that they'll handle at the company level. But as a customer, I would say stability is definitely something. It would be really nice if there wasn't an issue. So because of that, I'm going to give them a 3.5. And that's, again, it's my evaluation of it as a client and as a adamant gamer. I've gamed since I was 2. So just from my experience, I would say yes, 3.5. So you're looking at a C plus at this point, basically. If they get it handled, which they consistently work towards, once that's handled, it would be easily a 4.55, because once it does get stable, it does stay pretty stable. Story. So like I said, this rating, sadly, I can't give them a real rating. So right now I'm going to say it's a 2, which is a D. The reason being is there are certain story elements, so there are quests that have given story principles to this, but honestly, the game didn't necessarily, for what they built, they don't really need a story. It's something that I'm sure people would play just for the competitive PvP aspect and realism. But in all games, honestly, if there can be a story, I think that's wonderful, and it's really great to have. But for example, you take PUBG, there is no story to that game, and it's a success. There's no argument to the success level of that game. So yeah, they're saying that they want to have a story in there, that was the original intention. So right now, like I said, I'm going to say it's probably only a 2, right? So it's a D. With great potential, right? So with what they've shown in the quests and stuff like that, I think there's going to be a real big potential of the story being really interesting and very fun for this game. And then finally, the replay value. This one I have to give a 5. I really do. It's funny because I would say, normally the things that drive the replay value is going to be your story, or progression. Now, the progression in this, there are skills and stuff like that. It's not really, actually, you know what? Here, I want to stop there for a second. That video right there, if you were watching it, that was actually me fighting against my own clan. I'm in United We Stand. And I didn't even know. I went in as a scav, and turned out I was actually fighting my own clan that they had already run in there. So it was pretty humorous. I made sure to let them know, hey, that was me, guys. I'm so sorry. But yeah, so replayability, definitely a 5. Again, and this is kind of the same statement that I said, they don't really need a story. The game itself has provided enough reason for replay. with having quests and objectives to do that are typically small, but just having this sense of progression of getting more loot or better loot, and then modding and making better weapons, and then going in there just for the level of skill to say, yep, you know what, I'm like a survivalist, and it's like hardcore real, and I'm taking down scavs, I'm taking down players, I got teammates and stuff like that. All of that stuff provided a lot of replay value, and the other sense is they're going in a way now. So like the newest patch that they delivered, they went more into dynamic spawning and dynamic exiting, or extractions, as they put it. That actually created a large emphasis on replayability, because if you were getting bored before, the scenario is so different now. I mean, it's so different because just by doing this, they made it to where you go into different spots, and then you have to go to different spots, and it actually created like pathways of all different variety of where people are going to need to go. So that means where you won't necessarily always run into players. You might just be running into scavs, but then at the same time, it might be very dangerous because you might cross where everybody's going. Scav, player, it doesn't matter. And everyone spawns there and they're all fighting you. So every experience is definitely different. So like you saw, I was in one match, I ended up running into a couple players as a hatchetman. Here's another one. I'm on the other side. I come in as a hatchetman. I'm getting shot at from on the bridge. And then I came down and then found this guy trying to loot, and I went fought him, killed him, and now I'm getting the loot. And not to ruin it, but I actually make it out. I make it out of this. You can see that I'm bleeding all over the place. I can barely see. I'm just trying to grab what I can, hoping I don't die. I was really hoping to get some meds there. So now I'm like, okay, I got a better shotgun. I'm gonna load this up just in case. But honestly, if anyone even breathes on me, I'm dead. So definitely a 5. I find myself constantly coming back to it. I find that my friends are constantly coming back to it. Even in time, like I mentioned, the frustration because of the difficulty. There are times when just basically, I get spanked, right? So just one after another, I'm just losing loot like crazy. And I'm pretty frustrated because it's either, like there's some kind of desync, or someone's getting, just numerous people are getting really lucky and they just happen to know exactly where my head is all the time. It just happens. And then I get frustrated and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go play on my PlayStation, right? Or I'm gonna go do something productive and clean house or something. And I come back. I always come back. So it's typically within a couple hours. If not, like sometimes I take a break and play some other games because, as with Kings Court, I'm trying to show as many different games as possible. So I do have, I am starting to record a little more on Escape from Tarkov. And now that I have a video editor, I'm going to be lining up some of the videos so that way it's not so because the only thing was I didn't want to give you a 1-to-1 match ratio. I want to kind of give you highlights of the matches and stuff like that. And make the videos a little nicer for presentation. So let me know if you guys enjoy that. Again, so I'm going to have Kings Court. What did I call it? Look at that. I already forgot. Oh, I'm sorry. Kings Court Appraisals. Basically, it's to appraise the game. My intention is to do it after I've played an entire game, which I can show some video recordings. Honestly, though, with some games, they're like in early access for so long, or they for example, like this one. I've been playing this already for like 4.5 months, which is why I'm doing an appraisal already. Which then again, like I said, if a lot changes or in the delivery, I will then do another. But at least for now, there's that. So overall, right? If you match up everything, pretty much at this point, I would say this game is a 4. I would say it's a B. And it's great. It's a lot of fun. And now, Garrett, please keep in mind when I say the appraisal overall is a 4. That was the story, right? The story kind of drops it down because right now there isn't really a lot of elements to a storyline. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with the game based on that. So its entirety is good. And I would highly recommend this game to anybody. And that's with a 4. So if giving a rating, I would say On average, I would expect most games to be a 3, right? And that even on a 3, I would say that means it's definitely worth playing. If you are at a 4, I would say it's a really good game. And in this case, right, holds a lot of promise. And I would say that means you should probably play it. And if it's a 5, I would say if you didn't play it, I would be highly disappointed. And that's just sad. So that's really all I got. There's a little more here to some of the highlights in that. So, like, for example, I have this going all the way till I exit the match, and I had another one that was just kind of funny to see. Anyway, I hope you guys really enjoy this. I hope the appraisal is good for you. Please, leave comments. Let me know what you think. If if you agree, disagree, go ahead and shoot a like if you want to see more of this, or you found this to be helpful. Currently, as I said, with it being a 4, I would recommend it. You don't necessarily have to buy the biggest packages. To be honest, there's plenty of things in this, or plenty of ways to pull in loot and money and have it playable. Yes, some of the packages help you with like an early start, but honestly, that early start, as I said, because it's a difficult game, it gets very rough. That early start can totally turn into a very early loss, and it can be a very, very large loss at that case. So anyway, Happy New Year's. I hope you guys are safe. If you do drink, I hope you drink responsibly, and I hope you have a lot of fun without any trouble, like real trouble. Everyone says cause a little trouble, but not enough to regret it. Yeah. All right. Thanks.